We haven't seen each other in a very long time. She was actually just on Bloomberg television last night. So we're going to be talking again. And if you want to see that interview that's online, you guys tweeted it out from the Case Foundation.
Lots of Twitter activity around it.
and I did as well. All right, so again, very excited to talk with you here. With regards to the Case Foundation, the phrase that is on your website is profits with purpose.
Right.
What is the nearest and dearest example of success in your heart? Yeah,
well, so at the Case Foundation, we say, and by the way, hello everyone, and thanks for hanging in there with us. Lunch is shortly here. So we say we invest in people and ideas that can change the world. And when we think about this realm of impact investing, we think about that. And, you know, we have the privilege of seeing so many different entrepreneurs and founders, not just here in America, but also around the world, and investors as well, where we do a lot of convenings as we move around the world. So in many ways, I would say we have many children, right, that are our favorites. But I do like to talk about one impact company that's known to many of us, and we're here in New York City today, and that's where it's housed, and that is Warby Parker. You know, I think Warby is really an important impact story. Not only is it a B Corp, but more importantly, it's considered one of the hottest brands in the world today. You know, Fast Company has named it among the most innovative companies in America.
I bet you folks here have Warby Parker glasses. Who has Warby Parker glasses?
There you go.
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
there you
quite
go.
a lot. I do too.
And you know, if you hear the founders talk, what they talk about was a real passion to build truly a world-changing company with impact. But they knew to do that, they first had to be a world-changing brand. And I think they've pulled that off. And you know, they're super relevant and considered a hip brand by millennials. And I know there was a lot of discussion about millennials this morning, and including in this last panel. And you know, I think one thing that wasn't talked about was, look, these impact companies, these mission-driven new companies particularly, I think are in a unique position to attract and retain the best and the brightest talent. And I think there's a recognition of that among CEOs today, that you know, the next generation really wants to feel like they're doing more than just working for somebody to make a profit. But what Warby will tell you also is, look, they believe their success has been based on consumers who are embracing what they're doing because of the impact that's baked into the company. So I think it's a great example.
For you, for the Case Foundation, what are the metrics? What's the narrative that you like that attracts you to say, hey, this is a good investment?
Yeah, so we need to be clear. So the role of the Case Foundation itself is to champion the broader movement of impact investing. And there we've brought forward a number of resources, and some of you may know them. We started years ago, you know, this nomenclature problem that was talked about earlier. We saw a lot of people saying, I've heard about impact investing, not sure what it is, how do I get started? So we introduced what I call a crowdsourced document. I had about 300 meetings one year with people around impact that either knew nothing about it, were deeply steeped in finance, or were more on the mission side. And out of that, we created a short guide to impact investing. And it really surprised us the way it became a tool that actually the financial community used a lot. Maybe some of you have with your clients as well. So there was that resource that we put out. Then we put out a network map, really a visualization tool that's technology-based, that shows the ecosystem of impact investing. And while I'd love to sit here and tell you it's 100% of the impact investing world, it is not, but it's the data that was available. I think for a lot of investors, they come to it and they have no idea that this is, you know, robust activity taking place around the world. And in some cases, we were able to provide some detail around returns, but not in all cases. So the foundation itself provides resources, is really what I'm trying to say. All of the investing that takes place by us either personally or through my husband's investment firm, Revolution. And as we talked about last night, Ramy, and I'll share with the audience, so I was deeply engaged in the impact investing movement for a number of years and realized I had this portfolio that was sitting there from I spent my career in technology, so back to my AOL days. And like maybe some of your clients don't necessarily pay attention to the detail of what was in their portfolio, and that was certainly my story with this portfolio that I've been carrying forward. So I made a commitment to go 100% impact with it across all asset classes. And there, you know, a lot of lessons have been learned. Really walking the walk in a meaningful way has taught me a lot, and it's actually helped inform when I talk to potential investors. I understand what some of the shortcomings, concerns are, et cetera. And what I would say is today I'm 100% values aligned, which I was not when I first sort of peeled back the onion on my own portfolio. And we're well on our way towards full deployment of impact, but we like to have debates around exactly how long that's going to take.
On the topic of values alignment, a lot of folks, probably it's not the first thing that comes to mind. How did you start that journey for folks here who are thinking, how do I do that?
Yeah, well, I think the history before there was something called impact investment, there was divestment, right? And that was sometimes for some the first conversation around, well, there are things I know I don't want to own, and so take those out of my portfolio. This sort of flips that and says, well, what areas, are you passionate about that you believe can have positive impact on society, even if it's not traditionally defined as impact? So we built kind of a frame around that and then built the portfolio in support of that. But wherever there are impact investing opportunities that we believe are non-concessionary and attractive by asset class, we'll go that route. In some cases, we haven't necessarily found those in some asset classes, and that's sort of that process of building it out.
A lot of folks are saying that we're still in the infancy of things. I sort of don't want to say that because I don't want it to be in its infancy, but we've been talking about the general trend of things over the past 20 years.
Yeah.
Is now the time to jump in? Why is now the time to jump in?
Yeah.
When is it, if not now?
Well, if you're in the room and you're part of this, then I think
they want to be part of it.
Okay,
yeah, right?
Whether you are or you're not. But if you are, and if you're thinking about it, it's a terrific time to be founders together in what I will believe will be the future of investing. I really do. I mean, I believe we're going to get to a point where we don't put that impact in front of it anymore because responsible investors will just ask the natural questions. Why do I believe that? Well, a slide went up before that said your clients, when we asked you this question, believe data will play a huge role in where they take their money and their capital. There is compelling data, I could argue overwhelming data, supporting why investing in impact and sustainable opportunities is the most responsible investing. And I believe we'll get to that point as more and more and more data comes forward.
As chair of the National Geographic Society, how does that align with your role at the Case Foundation?
Yeah, well, they were talking earlier about what does sustainability mean. For us at National Geographic, we talk about part of our mission being science, exploration, storytelling, and education. But to what end? To a planet in balance. And one thing that has really dramatically changed at the Geographic in the last several years is that in the old days, we would just write grants to scientists and explorers out across the field doing the coolest things. But we realize we cannot achieve a planet in balance. We can't even achieve our mission over here without aligning with, say, a new class of entrepreneurs who are out there building exciting businesses to aid our mission as well. And an example I like to use is something called Ocean Explorer. It's a startup that really provides an underwater drone that anyone can use on a 100-meter tether to explore our rivers, something that are, believe it or not, very unexplored. So anybody now, a consumer, an individual, a citizen, can become an explorer of the waterways. It connects with a global database where you can, basically feed up the data that you get off of the drone. And it's like a whole new realm of exploration. Well, that's a company, and we're invested in that company. Our explorers today are comprised of entrepreneurs as well as scientists, because we just believe with all of these pieces working together, that's how we're going to achieve some of these really important and strategic goals.
Right, really interesting. A huge fan of the National Geographic Society ever since I was a kid, just watching and subscribing as well. In terms of the demographics, we talked about women, of course, we talked about millennials. One interesting thing that we talked about on the TV interview last night was about the growth in Asia. And I want to bring that up because you had actually been in Paris, but the Asia theme that you had continued when you visited South Korea last year had continued, and you were in France and you said, hey, there are a lot of folks here. What's happening in that space to help edify here?
Well, I think here in the U.S. it's easy to lose sight of what we're seeing around the world in impact investing. But what happened is about a little over a year ago, I got together with a number of investors and entrepreneurs from all over Asia, but we came together in Seoul. And I was just really quite taken with the interest and the traction that I was seeing on the ground. Have kept up with some of them, but then just about 10 days ago, I was in Paris with a large bank who brought together their top clients from around the world to talk about their new ESG and impact practice. And several of the clients were from Asia, very high net worth individuals. And it was stunning to see the interest and the momentum taking shape across Asia. But I'm equally excited about the new class of entrepreneurs in Asia. And you know, when we look at cultural differences, because I think they will play a role as we see impact investing go around the world, in Asia it makes total sense to me. Because you know, in the United States, the idea is you make all this money, the old way I think was, you make all this money, then at some point you decide, okay, I'm going to give it, you know, some portion of it away, and then you do philanthropy. But in Asia, philanthropy is not really a thing like it is here in the United States. And they really have such deep respect for business as a tool and actually something that, you know, benefits society. And so it's not surprising to me that in the Asian culture, it's almost more in their DNA to see business as part of a solution when you think about ways to create a better world. So I think, you know, I'm seeing real exciting traction in Asia. And what I love is this is one of those areas, impact investing, we don't know who's going to emerge sort of, I don't want to say as the winner, but maybe as the early leader. I think it's up for grabs. We're seeing a lot in Europe as well. And so, you know, one of the things I had the privilege of doing was serving on a G7 task force for the United States on impact investing some number of years ago. You know, the G7 countries all came together and we each issued a report with policy recommendations around how to move this needle. We had a lot of progress on that front here in the United States, but other countries did as well.
In terms of Asia, where are the hot spots in terms of philanthropic growth?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily tie it to philanthropic growth. I would tie it to impact investing growth. Right. And I would say Hong Kong is emerging, not surprisingly.
Most of the millionaires there.
Yes. And we talked about the fact that you may or may not know that Japan's pension fund contributed over yen 1 trillion to sustainable investments. So it's getting a lot of attention in Japan as well. But Vietnam turns out to be a really interesting area. And you know, there was a young entrepreneur that I met when I was in Seoul, and he was just getting ready to bring his company to go public on US market, which it did. And literally the week it did, he wrote me and said, okay, I'm really ready now. I have all this capital and I want to deploy it for good. Can we talk about different ways I can put it out there in the market? I want to be clear, the role that I play or any of the organizations that I'm affiliated with are not advisory in terms of where to put your investment, but more at sort of this higher level around what are we seeing in the market, what are some opportunities I should be thinking about across sectors and asset classes.
Pushing ahead to January, you have a new book coming out. I should have brought it to my desk. Be Fearless. And there are 5 themes on that you really are hitting home. What are some of your favorites, and how does that dovetail with responsible investing here?
Yeah, so one of them is be bold, make big bets. And you know, I think when we think about this sort of new realm, there is data to give us all comfort that this is not reckless risk. Indeed, you know, if you look at what some of the large asset managers are doing as they look at what's in their portfolio, as I said earlier, there's compelling data to say the returns can be greater if you consider this. So I think impact investing is a place where you can be bold and make a big bet and really see a future in which capital, you know, I was teaching at the School of Management, which is Yale's business school, a class on impact investing, and this guy raises his hand from the back row, and he's kind of shy and awkward. And he says, well, I just always wondered, why would you just settle for a financial return? You know, and that really sat with me, like it's a totally different perspective of this next generation. If you have capital, what a powerful tool that is to change this world. And why haven't we required more of our capital than simply a financial return? So that's the big bet I hope you all are willing to make if you haven't made it already. And, you know, as I said, I'm hoping it's just the way investing happens in the future.
And that comes out January of 2019, right?
January 8th, yes.
All right, one more question for you, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Make sure to send your questions on over to the app. We all know, most of us probably know that you signed the Giving Pledge.
Yes.
What is the one thing you want to do to change in your lifetime?
Well, you know, it's interesting because our real reason for signing the Giving Pledge, we had made a commitment to give away the vast majority of our wealth when we were just getting started, long before the Giving Pledge. But to go public in that way felt really kind of uncomfortable for us. But ultimately, why we chose to do that was that we just saw it as an extraordinary opportunity to learn together with others who were bringing resources to play as well. And interestingly enough, we help lead the working group on impact investing in the Giving Pledge, and it's the largest working group of the Giving Pledge. So I already am seeing the impact of that. You know, we had one gathering on impact investing where we were kind of, you know, having folks talk through what is it, where, you know, where opportunities, et cetera. And we had over $300 billion of assets represented just in that one room. So the ability to move the needle at scale through this group is pretty exciting.
Any one thing that you would want to see changed? Maybe not you, if you want to go there.
I mean, I think what we hope is that ultimately the Giving Pledge becomes something that everyone gets to participate and learn in one way or another. And if you see what we've done, did a webinar, for instance, with Rockefeller Brothers to have them explain their own path through impact. And, you know, we basically agreed that if we do that webinar, that needs to be available to the world, not just to Giving Pledge members. So I think what we see is the opportunity to use some of the resources and, you know, the stuff we put together around the Giving Pledge to go out into the world in a broader way.
Great stuff. Thank you for that commitment. I want to open up to questions right now. Lauren?
Sure. We spoke a couple of times yesterday about corporate governance and specifically about corporate culture.
Yeah.
As the leader of multiple organizations, what do you feel is your role in defining the culture?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, every organization should feel compelled to define the culture. And I think what we're learning today is that maybe if that happened, employees don't necessarily know what is the ethos, what is the ethic of the company I'm working for, what should I be thinking about as I go about my job every day. I think it's a critical time to define the kind of culture you want to have. But it's more than just culture. It's truly what's in your DNA. What is the ethics of what you want to take forward? We see this as a more compelling need, of course, in technology today maybe than ever before. But we also see it in science and many other realms. And so I think the first thing is make sure you define what you want your culture to be based on guiding principles and ethics.
We have a questioner who mentions that we've brought up women and millennials multiple times today, but not as much about people of color or immigrants. So can you speak about what you think the role of those two are in responsible investing, or what role responsible investing's role is for them?
Right. Well, we talked about this last night. You know, I think there's sort of this interesting crossover between what we call inclusive entrepreneurship and impact investing. I believe there is an economic and innovation imperative today, which is to take the people who have mostly been left on the sidelines and bring them onto the field of play. Back them with mentorship, back them with capital. You know, we believe brilliance is universal, but opportunity is not. And we are just blown away, no matter what community we go into anywhere in the world, at the great ideas and people who are simply lacking backing. The data is stark. Last year, 90% of venture capital went to just men. Only 1% went to companies with an African American founder. And 78% of capital went to just 3 places in the United States: New York, Massachusetts, and California. So that is not a diversified economy, and that is not an economy that's taking advantage of all kinds of different perspectives on innovation. And you know, we're really trying to help lead the charge to say to people, think about inclusivity as a way to achieve economic empowerment in communities really across the world, but also the next chapter of innovation for people who've been kind of left out of the innovation economy.
You know, off of that, how can people lend that hand and pull someone up with them? I think every company around the world has this conversation on what to do. I think we had an Ernst & Young executive say that inclusion is one thing, but if you don't have a community around that, then it leads to isolation.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, again, another data point to throw out there: in the top 100 firms today, 94% of the partners are white men. So is it surprising that that's where they send the capital? To the network that they know. I mean, the bottom line is we all have our networks, and it tends to be that our networks are a little bit like us. So I think just being super intentional and making sure that who's making the decision around where capital will flow, where mentorship will go, is a diverse table itself. You know, I'm a judge often at pitch competitions, and of course we have our entrepreneurs in them all the time. It's way, way, way too often that we'll have an entrepreneur of color or a woman pitching to a group of people that they have every reason to believe can't really relate to them in some ways. So, you know, I just think being super intentional about mixing it up. And again, the data here is really clear. We respect McKinsey in this world. We respect Deloitte in this world. Read the data. Companies outperform when they're diverse. So as investors, we should pay attention to that.
When you invest, do you use diversity lenses or metrics?
When we invest, absolutely. Well, again, as an investor, I've sort of put a frame together around those areas that I care about. Gender and diversity is something that's really important to me. So if I have two deals staring at me and they're both compelling and this one adds a diversity element to it, I'm always going to go over here. Why? Well, A, I care. I think it's a good thing to do. But more importantly, as a hard-nosed investor, there's compelling data that says this is more likely to outperform than the one that doesn't have that working for it.
All right, why don't we do one more question to wrap?
Sure, we'll do one more.
Yeah, you have to pick a good one now.
I know, right?
Oh, pressure's on.
No pressure now. How have you seen investors and entrepreneurs who have maybe downplayed the threats of climate change in the past start to change their thinking?
Well, you know, it's funny because we have this debate sometimes about whether, talk about a nomenclature problem, you know, the global warming title versus the climate change title. I don't think there's anyone who has eyes to see that doesn't see that the climate is changing today. But I think, you know, you don't really, in my opinion, have to be totally sold that this is going to be a permanent thing or otherwise. You just need to believe maybe part of our role is to care about our planet. Maybe part of our role is to do whatever we can to pass on the healthiest planet to those who come behind us. And I have seen, in my opinion, a sea change where a lot of people who before just wouldn't even consider it, today, kind of like we're talking about in impact investing, it's almost more of why not? You know, why wouldn't you make this part of your consideration? And of course, in audit committees around corporate America, they realize very clearly that you're actually reckless if you're not considering the impacts of what climate change can do and how it can impact your company. So it's another whole sector where I see a really big change.
And interestingly, I'm glad that question came up because there has been an interesting sentiment shift. A new Monmouth University poll just came out in the past few days, maybe a week or so, saying that climate change as a belief in terms of its devastating effects on the environment is believed by a majority of both Democrats as well as Republicans.
Right, it really
now.
is changing. Yeah, we see this at National Geographic as well.
That's terrific. All right, we'll have to leave it there. Jean Case of the Case Foundation, thank you so much for your
Thanks,
thoughts,
Ramy.
your time, your leadership, and
Thank
your
you, everyone. Great to be with you.